If you're in the middle of a divorce and you keep thinking, why do I feel like I'm disappearing? Like my marriage is ending, but so is the version of you that knew who you were. This episode is for you. So, because today, a certified divorce coach and you 2.0 author Justin Milrad is going to show you how to stop spiraling, get clear on the next right steps emotionally, financially, and as a parent, and start rebuilding the strongest version of you on purpose. Welcome back. Welcome to Divorcing Strong, the podcast that pulls no punches when it comes to divorce. I'm Becky Sampson, better known as Bulldog Becky Brockovich, and I'm here to give you the straight talk, the strategies, and the subpoena secrets you won't hear anywhere else. With expert guests and proven advice, you'll learn your rights, your options, and gain your power that encourages a fair and equitable outcome. Divorce doesn't have to break you. It can build you. Let's get to it. Well, welcome back to another episode of Divorcing Strong. I am your host, Becky Sampson. And as always, I love doing these podcasts, usually Tuesday through Thursday. So if you ever want to check in those days for new episodes, I am bringing people from all over the country to be able to help and assist you in your divorce or your family and friends, because I've recognized that most people that are referred to me because of a family or a friend or a therapist or somebody that knows somebody that is going through a divorce. So today is no different. I just wanted to make a couple of announcements before we get going. If you want to download, you can download this. It's a free guide. It's basically 100 divorce terms. I always say that on my shows because it's very important if you're navigating a divorce that you understand the terminology. And these are legal terms. So even if you're doing it on your own or you're working with an attorney, I've compiled these terms because I want you to understand what somebody is saying and how that is used within the court system or within the legal system when it comes to divorce. So thank you so much for joining today. And today I'm kind of really excited because I just barely met this gentleman a couple weeks ago, and to hear what he's been through and why he's so passionate about helping people now, and the resources that he can give to you to help you through this process as well is very, very important. So today's episode of Divorcing Strong, I'm joined by Justin Milrad. He's a certified divorce coach, author of You 2.0, a founder of Reclaim and Reboot. Let me set the scene. So you're standing in the kitchen, staring at a number that you don't like, your bank balance, your attorney retainer, your child support estimate, and you can feel your identity sliding out from underneath you, and at the exact same time. Divorce can be a legal process on paper, but in real life, it's grief shock and a decision fatigue with kids and finances woven into every single day. So Justin knows the terrain personally as a father of 3 who's lived the complexities of divorce and co-parenting. And professionally, he's built a coaching approach that blends compassion with real life strategy. With an MBA and a background in financial planning, he helps people stabilize the practical side while also healing the emotional side. So you don't just get through the divorce, you grow through it and come out clearer, stronger, and more aligned than before. So stay tuned, because we're going to be talking about today what could change how you move through this chapter and how you can rebuild into the next one. So I want to go ahead and welcome Justin to the show.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Becky. Thank you so
Justin.
much for having me.
Yes, you are welcome. I appreciate, I know that you are busy and busy helping people. So I appreciate your time. So I just want to kind of start off with the first question is, how did you get into this space? What's the backstory? I know you told me a little bit about it in the last week, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring on this podcast, because sometimes people don't know the story for men, right? Because we hear a lot of women's stories, but I appreciate when a man can come on and say, hey, this is what I experienced, and then how you support people through this process and why it's so important to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Never in a million years did I think I was going to be divorced, let alone be a divorce coach. My ex-wife and I, we were the couple that everyone wanted to be. We were the power couple.
Mm.
And, everything was great until it wasn't. COVID really turned our life upside down. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was we started a business together that was extraordinarily successful. We started a mental health and substance abuse treatment program. And, during COVID, dealing with everything that was going on, 3 young kids, social justice upheaval, COVID, a world turned upside down. It broke our marriage.
Mm.
And, we had agreed to get divorced and we were amicable. And we agreed that we're going to respect each other and it's going to be easy and we're going to do the right thing. And then the bulldog attorneys came. So, choosing the right attorney, I think, is really important. And,
Yep.
untangling the world that you're in becomes very difficult. And we started amicable. Then, our bulldog attorneys got involved and they started creating chaos. And of course, we want to follow what our attorneys tell us to do. And it got really bad. Fast forward, we spent 7 figures on a divorce that should have never happened that way. We did an 8-day jury trial. So now everything in our lives is public record. And, it nearly broke me. And I had never heard of a divorce coach. And
Mm-hmm.
woman who I'm now engaged to, we were dating for 2.5 years and we recently got engaged. So just as an aside, you can find happiness after divorce. But, she went through a somewhat contentious divorce and she was doing really well. And I asked her, how can you be doing so well so quickly? And she said, I had a divorce coach. And 8 weeks before our trial, I hired a divorce coach and I went instantly from victim to survivor and, figuring out how to make the most out of a tough experience so that I can move forward with, clarity and focus and intention. And I was so impressed by what I learned working with a divorce coach that I wanted to dedicate my life. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done a lot of really different things. I've never done anything like this, but I don't want anyone to go through the hell that I went through because, divorce can go smooth, but it can also go off the rails. And in my particular case, it went off the rails and caused a lot of damage, for me, for my kids, for my ex, and for our entire ecosystem and community.
Well, Justin, I love what you just said because when you got with the divorce coach, the one thing that I heard you say at least is that you went from being a victim, right? Because sometimes you can get stuck in that place going, look what they're doing all to me. And you were able to shift that. I mean, were there any other real big things that divorce coach taught you that made a big difference in you getting through that last part?
Yeah, absolutely. Really the importance of a strong co-parenting relationship. And while our divorce itself was awful, I'd make it 11 out of 10 in terms of how terrible it was and the pain that it caused. My divorce coach was able to help me realize how important co-parenting is. And so I'm happy to say, I think my ex would agree, we're doing an A+ job on co-parenting. And frankly, that's the greatest job on earth, being a parent. Everything else we can rebuild. So I think that was the best advice, but also the radical acceptance, the apology I was looking for. It's never going to come, the codependence that I didn't realize we had. I was knowledgeable about it and then really challenging me on, while I didn't ask for this situation, it's really an opportunity to get off the hamster wheel of life, look at everything, what has worked, what hasn't, and with intention, design the life that I want. So I can honestly say, a couple years out, I am much happier. My life has a lot more intention. My relationship with my kids is great. My relationship with my ex is great, but it took a lot of rebuilding and it was really hard. A divorce is an earthquake.
Well, and that's one thing I really admire about you, because when we talked before, when you're like, wow, I have a good relationship with my former, and I'm going, really? After that much contention, you guys were able to come back together, and hopefully this is okay that you shared this with me, or that I share this, but I think both of you regretted going to those awful places in the divorce, because you just would have felt like it would be much better if you would have worked together instead of against each other. And that is not something that you really hear all the time when you're dealing with high conflict divorce, that you're able to, I had the same thing happen with my first divorce. We were able to come back together peacefully. And it is possible. I want people to know it's possible, but you just said it does take work.
Yeah. And I think there's such a mindset on winning the divorce, and who even knows what that really means, but you're not really winning in divorce. No one wins in divorce, but what you want to do is you want to win in life.
And I love that you're engaged to be married again. So I like the hope that you bring to people. Same thing with me. I'm happily married. So there is life after divorce. So I know that you have a book, right? The You 2.0. So what started? Yes, that one. What spurred you to write the book, and who's it really for, and what's it really about?
So it's called You 2.0, Divorce, A Better Way Forward. And really what I mean by that is there's the traditional way of divorce. Now, when we think of divorce, we think of the logistics of divorce. And that is, you file, you do discovery, you go through all this different process, and eventually you get a stamp, on a divorce decree with an agreement. You split assets, you split custody time if they're kids, and then you move on. But what we don't really think about is us. So number one, the book does talk about the logistics and how to be smart about it, how to be effective, how to choose the right team, because many people need more than just an attorney. They need an attorney, they need a divorce coach, they may need a therapist, a business evaluator, people working in the world of subpoenas. There's lots of things that need to happen. So, building the divorce team, I think, is really important, and having strategy. But then there's also the, what do I do while I'm contemplating divorce, while I'm going through divorce, and then post-divorce. And that's the work very few people do. And I think that's the difference between drifting through divorce and thriving through divorce. And, I know there's a lot of data, but the patterns that I've seen is a lot of people 5 years out, they're still stuck. Well, when you kind of use the model of You 2.0, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, you're already, starting to live in the next version of you, which is hopefully the best version of you. And a lot of people try to go back to how it was. Well, it wasn't that good if you got divorced, right? So it gives you an opportunity to kind of reassess and design the future that you want. The book also talks a lot about financials. We don't really do a great job in the process developing a budget during the divorce, as well as a post-divorce budget, as well as designing what does a life look like, that you want. The money matters, and we're often not prepared for mediation. And just to put this in perspective, women are 41% worse off after divorce financially, and 100%. Men are 27% worse off. So, one of the things of radical acceptance that we need to do is that this is going to be hard, and we're going to have to make some decisions, and we're going to have to make some changes, and anything that we can plan for, we should do that. And things that we should consider while we're, for example, in mediation, that we don't necessarily talk about: education, possibly college, car for the kids, insurance, braces. These are all things. And I had a high-powered, very expensive attorney, and we didn't cover all of this. Now, he did a great job, for what I asked and what I wanted. But, these are the things that we don't necessarily talk about.
Well, that's what
we talk about.
I'm finding that same thing, Justin. Honestly, like, people are saying, I have an attorney, but they're not covering a lot of this stuff. Well, and really, do you really want to pay them at that rate to go through all the nitpicky things that you need to consider? And that's why a life coach totally makes sense. In order, I've done life coaching for many years, but a divorce coach is really looking at the bigger picture and letting you know the minute stuff to, hey, here's all your options. Here's all the things that you need to consider. Because the attorneys are there to do their job, which is the legal aspect of it. Are you finding that as well? Is it's really, it really is a multi-prong approach to finally getting a divorce and making that change for people that are going through that process?
No question about it. And I'd say the two biggest areas where there's opportunity now, of course, every attorney is different and many of them
Mhm.
are excellent. Number one is preparation for mediation, really knowing and understanding your numbers and what you need is a point that I find missed. And then the other is co-parenting. So I'll
Mhm.
give an example, and I hear this from many of my clients. They go through the entire process, and then right before they're about to send the paperwork in, the attorney will say, oh, by the way, you have to take this 4-hour mandated class on co-parenting.
Oh,
It happened to me. And I will say it's an excellent class. And I wish that that was the first thing my attorney gave me, because I made some mistakes in front of my
mhm.
kids. I made some mistakes co-parenting, things I can't take back. So when I work with my clients, when we talk about the kids, depending on where they are in the divorce, I say one of the first things you have to do, if you haven't done it already, is take this class, because you want to make sure your kids are doing well. And an
Mhm.
interesting study, there's a whole bunch of different studies there. Parents who co-parent effectively, their kids, 10 plus years out, are just as well as if they were still married.
Yes.
So there's a big clue in there.
Well, and
Co-parent.
I think a lot of kids I mean, I've done several podcasts on this very thing, is that the kids really oftentimes get forgotten, because we're
Yep.
in survival mode, right? And so we don't think about what they're thinking of or what they need, or even in how to empower them through the process, because we're just, you know what I mean?
Yep. And Becky, you and I spoke about this, when we talked last
Mhm.
week, but divorce is typically between two decent humans
Mhm.
who've outlived their marriage,
Mm.
but it's quickly turned into a war. So my ex is awful. My ex is a horrible human. My ex is X, Y, and Z. In many cases, that's not true. It's just our perception. Often it's our anger or our trauma talking. But if
Mhm.
we acknowledge that, our ex is a decent human being and they care for the kids just as much as I do, although their skill set may be different,
Mhm.
and you and I spoke about this before the call. The women I typically call the backpack fairies, because they're the ones who are great at getting, kids signed up for school and camp and offer, really strong emotional support, etc. Doesn't mean the dad is incapable. It just means he needs some skills and he needs some training and he needs some advice. So
Mhm.
when you have a strong co-parenting relationship, number one, your kids are going to do better. But number two, the hate and anger dissipate over time, and then your business partners in the business of your kids. So
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be ugly. It's a broken system.
So you, as a dad of three, though, what's the co-parenting mistake that you made once that you promise yourself to never repeat?
So I was hurt. There was betrayal. There was,
Yeah.
broken trust. So I took some of my hurt out on my kids. I was so mad. I could not believe that certain things happened, or certain things were being handled a certain way, which were against my values.
Mhm.
So, I would, in some ways, rely on my kids to hear me out. And the mistake I
Mm.
made is, our kids shouldn't be parenting us. We should
Right.
be parenting them. We need to be there for them during these emotional times and to support them. And, talking badly about your ex, even though we want to do that, write it down, talk to your therapist, talk to your friends, but don't talk to your kids about it, because it's
And
still
so,
their mother or father.
how old were your kids when you were going through your divorce?
So 12, 10, and 6.
Wow. So those are very informative years
Very
for them.
formative years. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it is a temptation when you're hurting as a parent, you want that child, or maybe even you're looking for validation from your children, right? You want to kind of get a gauge of where they're at between the two, that we make that mistake, and it doesn't sound like it helps them. It's so having that boundary within yourself to say, okay, I'm going to go talk to a therapist. I'm going to talk to a friend. I'm going to write it down or do something other than. I mean, that's really good advice, to be honest with you, because we're all human, and we want that validation. We want to feel better in a horrible situation like you've been through. So And
Yep.
so,
It creates trauma bonds, for the
yeah.
kids, and then they feel loyalty to both parents, and it's just not a comfortable situation for them.
And then they feel like they have to hide, right? You can see that they're not comfortable talking about it because they're stuck in between the two. So that is tough. So in your book though, do you usually, is that, um, who usually is the ideal? Are they dealing more high conflict, or is it just in general people that are going through the divorce trying to find themselves through that process?
So it's really for anyone who's contemplating divorce, anyone
Mhm.
going through divorce, or anyone post-divorce. It offers a little bit of everything. I created this book.
The
It's the
workbook?
U 2.0 workbook. And, I had no plans to create it, but some people who read the book kind of said to me, this is great. I love these exercises, but I really need something a little more structured to write it down. So anyone who wants to do introspection, and, my final words will always be, you have to do the work. And what does the work mean? It means the different exercises for introspection. It means getting healthy. It means setting intentions. It means planning out your future, coming up with a strategy. Because if we don't do the work, we will still be in pain.
So it's interesting that so what's really interesting is that before you got divorced, you were in the mental health industry. How did that help you navigate through your own divorce, knowing what you knew about mental health?
So that's a great question.
Yeah.
I studied the brain. I understood the brain. I understood feelings. I understand emotions. I understood the connectivity of the different parts of your life. That your
Mhm.
identity blows up, right? You go from we to me. And in my particular case, it wasn't just me as a person, as a dad, as a husband. We also had a business together. So this took everything. It was like the
Mm,
triple punch. It was, how's this going to affect my kids? It's going to be, I'm no longer married, and my job, something that
mhm.
I took so much pride and love in. It was impossible for us to work together, going through a divorce. It's just not something you can easily do.
Right. Right. And it's hard when your whole life, right? Because most of the times you have work or something that's keeping you busy, but when work and marriage are colliding,
Yep.
that's difficult. What kind of advice would you give to someone, that, like, how do you support somebody if it's a family or friend that's listening? How would you advise them to support somebody that's going through a divorce on the mental health side?
I love that question, because this is an area that a lot of people struggle with. Every single one of my clients, and myself, when you go through a divorce, you become a pariah. It's your
Mm,
identity. And it
mhm.
shouldn't be. And people think that because you're going through a divorce, something's wrong. It's like, stay away from them. It's
Right.
infectious. And you and I both know that's not the case. It's a temporary point in life. And we also know of lots of people who stay in marriages who are completely miserable.
Mhm.
So, people often don't engage, not because they don't care, not because they don't love you, but they don't know what to do.
Mm,
So,
that's
I
totally
think,
true.
yeah, as a friend, say, listen, I understand you're probably going through a really hard time. How can I support you? And the other thing is, it's very lonely going through divorce. You lose a lot of friends. Sometimes you lose family. Um, Try and get that person out with you, whether it's going for a walk or grabbing a coffee or going to see a movie. Community is so important. And you don't even have to talk about the divorce. Go see a concert, play pickleball, go for a walk, uh, you know, work on an art project together. There's so many amazing things that you can do that will help, your friend stop thinking about the divorce, and remind them about the beauty in life and the beauty of friendship and connection.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it is, oftentimes it's a lonely place, because when somebody doesn't know what it feels like, they really try to avoid talking to you about it, right? They don't want to, the minute you start talking about it, they're like, oh, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? What do I do? And and you just gave us some great ideas, which is, it's not necessarily ignoring it, but let's distract and let's find good things that we can do that can help. And then there's also sometimes, that We do need to be a listening ear. And I love what you just said, is that you ask them, what kind of support do you need from me? And let the person going through the divorce decide what they need, what support they need. They may not know what it is, but that's a really good one, right? Not trying to tell them what they need, just say, hey, what do you need from me? How can I support you?
Yeah. I also think it's really important to be choosy in who you take advice from.
Absolutely.
Some friends or family, they may just be really angry and they're like, yeah, go destroy, your ex, go after everything. And that may not be your intention, but now you're feeling conflicted because there are your values. And then there's, what people are expecting of you. So, use people for the right reasons, and have them support you in the right way. And if someone's going to be strongly opinioned in a certain way that is very different from your thinking, just the topic of divorce or that topic should be off limits.
Yeah, because you don't want somebody to wind you up.
Yeah, exactly. Stick to the professionals.
Yeah, stick to people that actually know how to help you through that in a healthy way. Because I mean, that's the whole point of the Divorcing Strong, right? It's like, how can you come through this? And I know you believe the same way, but it's like, how can you make this experience make you better than bitter? Because it's nobody's interested in being around people who are bitter. And yes, it's part of the process and the grief. Like, talk a little bit about that, actually, from your experience with working with clients, is how do you help them through that grief process?
I think radical acceptance is a really important, tool. I think moving, there's grief and then there's spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
And, healthy grief, you can move through it by journaling, by talking about it, by looking at evidence-based practices, by understanding how it affects your body, your mind, body, spirit, and soul. And then there's, spiraling loops that just replay the same movie over and over again. One is productive, one isn't. Grief honors the loss. Spiraling rehearses the story. So you really want the grief to shrink over time. And how do you do that? You address it, you deal with it, you acknowledge it. You also take responsibility for, where you may have failed, or where circumstances, created a certain situation. But you also look for moments of joy. And, I love focusing on joy, because the more you focus on joy, the less the grief is front and center. And at some point, you're just going to forget about it and you're going to move past it.
Yeah. What do you say to people that just say, get over it?
It's terrible advice. You can't get over it, but you have to do the work to move through it. But you also have to be realistic. Life isn't fair. You may not get an apology. You may, things may not turn out the way that you want, but you have agency over your future, and you shouldn't let or the situation take up all this real estate in your head, because if you do, you go back to spiraling.
I can tell that you've got 12-step work behind you, addiction recovery.
I do.
Remember we talked that many years ago, I lost 130 pounds through that process, and I'm still very much connected and in recovery for 12 steps. So it is about taking responsibility. It is about very much about radical acceptance, because it is what it is. People are what they are. And something that you just said is very important to remember, that you may or may not ever get resolution or someone to say you're sorry for what they might have done or maybe what you've done. But if you do your own work, you can come through stronger that way. So that I love that about 12 step. And I love finding people that understand that, because I've thought about this recently. Justin, I don't know if you don't even have to be an addict to have addictive behaviors, right? Necessarily.
Of course not. Yeah.
Right. So people that are victims are always going to be victims, and they're always going to find every reason to be and feel the way that they do. And yes, is there a time for that? Because you do need to feel it and release it. But then there's another time where you kind of go, okay, what part did I play? How did I contribute to this? And accept those things and love ourselves and have grace for ourselves through those experiences, because no one's, we all have responsibility in what happens to our lives. And once you can get to that place of acceptance, now you're really doing the work.
You know, the title of my next book that is almost fully written is called Divorce Recovery. It's a single player game. At the end of the day, it's up to us to feel better. You know,
100%.
I'll use the example of infidelity. So, you know, someone makes a decision and that's their decision. They own it, but there's a reason why they went there. And, you know, maybe it was because there wasn't enough attention given to them. Maybe they didn't feel seen. Maybe it could be lots of things, you know, maybe, you know, so we all have some level of responsibility. Not that we should own that for the infidelity. That was their choice and that's for them to deal with. But, you know, the more introspection and deep work that we do, the better our recovery is going to be. And divorce recovery, U 2.0 is divorce recovery. It's a real form of recovery because it's one of the most traumatic events in our life. It's the equivalent of death for many people of a family member, you know, someone really close. But the difference is, you know, that they might just be down the street, you know, and that your life is going to continue and it's going to continue to reverberate, you know, things that have happened. So it takes work.
It does take work, and that work is worth it because you're worth it. And I really appreciate the fact that if we can really see the lessons and move forward, like I say, oftentimes is that divorce is happening for you, not to you. It's very different when you look at it from going, okay, what am I going to learn from this? How can I be better because of it? And getting people with that kind of mindset around you to support you in doing that work, because people look at it as work as like it's hard, but it's actually very freeing because you're not responsible for what other people do and say, but you're responsible for what you do and what you say, and especially with what we say to ourselves up here, right? It's
100%.
It's crazy. So
yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery. All we have is the now.
Absolutely.
So
well,
we live in the moment.
Justin, I appreciate what you're doing. I love that you took your experience, because yours was pretty high conflict, a lot of energy, a lot of difficult moments, but you made the best out of it. And you and your wife have come back together to do good co-parenting, to be able to learn how to work together, take responsibility, and really build a really strong relationship, or a strong future for you now, which is what I really can feel, that what you do for other people is you help them rebuild themselves after that. And that goes along with exactly what this whole show is about. So my question to you is, what does divorcing strong mean to you?
You know, I think divorce is a painful, expensive tuition that we pay. The mistake is paying it and refusing to take the education from that. So to me, divorcing strong is take the education of everything that you learned, you know, during divorce and pre-divorce, and utilize that so that you come out stronger, and more intentional on the other side.
Thank you. And I know you've done that for yourself. So I appreciate the work that you've done so that you can help support other people. And Justin also has a podcast. So make sure you look in the show notes where you can go check out his podcast and his book and his workbook. And if you want to go ahead and get a hold of him to work with him, you do work with people throughout the United States, right?
I do. And sometimes I work with couples who are going through amicable divorce. I do a lot of single person. I do support groups, and I love it.
Awesome. Well, I love it. Thank you so much for doing that, and for the work that you do. And hold on just 1 second. Hold on. We want to thank everyone for another episode of the Divorcing Strong podcast. I've been with Justin Milrad, actually. And thank you. And know that you are loved, that you're cared for, and that this is a temporary state until you can get through that. Because I got a call the other day from one of my clients, and she received a call from somebody that was in absolute panic when it comes to her divorce. I'm sure that there was a lot more going on in her life, but it ended up tragic. And I know that many people in this space may feel like they want to give up and may feel like their life is ending. But today, even with Justin and the effort that he's making to help you rebuild your life, to have hope that there is life after divorce, I want you to know that there is. And there's this glorious, unwritten future that you get to plan out and get to live out. So thank you again for joining us, and join us on our next episode. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to the Divorcing Strong podcast. This episode is sponsored by Only Subpoenas, where we make subpoenas simple, powerful, and 100% compliant. If you're having a hard time getting the information you need to settle for a fair and equitable divorce, let us help you. Whether you're an attorney or you're navigating divorce on your own, subpoenas can uncover the truth, secure the evidence you need, and level the playing field. To see how we can help, book an appointment by visiting our website at onlysubpoenas.com.